right. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. If you've been joining us this month, you know it's been one crazy month. I think we have over 60 live events this month, all kinds of amazing themes, but our main focus has been on space exploration. So we've been connecting with scientists, with engineers, even with astronauts to learn all about how we can explore our solar system, further out into the universe, but of course how all this exploration helps us look back at our planet and learn more about the home that we do have. So we've got a great event in store this morning, but before we get in, I want to remind our classrooms that we'll probably mix in a Kahoot event today as well. So if you have one-to-one technology at your seats, you can have that ready. Otherwise, your teacher can just put it up at the front of the classroom and you can shout out your answers that way. Okay, well, let's get to the main event. I'm really excited to have Adele Luta joining us today. She's a scientist and an innovator. She's supporting the exploration spacesuit and lander integration for NASA's next missions to the moon. Over 19 years, the last 19 years, her background in physics has empowered her to support multiple domains, including human spaceflight, defense, and healthcare. She's a new member of the Explorers Club, which is an incredible exploration organization that you can find lots of information about online. Through this work, she's been training astronauts for spacewalks on mockups of the International Space Station at Johnson Space Center in the Neutral Buoyancy Lab. If you've never heard of that before, check that out. It's one of the largest indoor pool facilities on the planet. But Adele's also really passionate about sharing science and inspiring others to pursue STEM careers. So she always says, science doesn't care if you are cool, rich, or have lots of followers. It is a demanding and amazing and powerful. In her free time, she spends time scuba diving, helping to rebuild coral reefs in the Florida Keys. I'm going to bring Adele in with us right now. And Adele, I was noticing on social media, you're even popping up in parks in statue form. Pretty darn cool.
That is true. It's been an honor to be a AAAS IFTHN ambassador, and they wanted to bring awareness of all of us, all the different, over 100 female scientists and engineers and innovators. So if you are in Dallas, or if you're planning to be in Dallas this weekend, the exhibit's ending, but you can go see a life-size 3D printed bright orange statue of me.
All right. Well, Adele, it's always great to see you. We're excited to get to know you a little bit better today. And then, of course, we're going to have a great Q&A session with our live classrooms.
Sounds great. So I just want to say good morning to you guys. I'm excited to talk to you this morning. And so I want to hear good morning back. I don't think that was loud. Yeah, we got to get louder, right? Yeah. So it's Friday, right? So weekend's almost here. So I am very excited about this topic. I want to get you guys excited about this topic, and that is that we are going to do human space exploration, and we're going to go out beyond low Earth orbit to the moon, and eventually some of you are going to help get us to Mars. So my name is Adele Luta. I'm a scientist and innovator, and you can see my social media accounts there. So if you or your parents want to follow me through Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, I do post about a whole bunch of different fun videos on STEM and exploration and technologies that it makes that we need to take us there. So I'm going to get into this presentation. I look forward to your questions at the end. So this is a picture of what we call an infrastructure. So NASA is funding different companies to build all of the things that we think we're going to need to be able to sustainably live on the moon. Right here, you can see that there is our human lander right here, and there's a couple of different versions of this that are being considered and developed right now. So this is just one picture that NASA designed. There's a pressurized rover, which means you can actually go inside, take off your spacesuit, and live there, and then travel around, kind of like a pressurized RV. If any of you know what RV, you go travel with your families. And then we have an unpressurized rover here, where they would stay in their spacesuits and they could travel. And then we have all this communications and power infrastructure that's going to need to be built. And for me, what I work on is I work on the human spacesuits here. So you can see there's 2 here and 2 spacewalkers here. And making sure that those spacesuits are going to be compatible and work well with all of this infrastructure. So you think about your everyday life, you know, you have your house, you have your car, you have your computer systems. all the technology, all the things you use every day just to live and work on Earth, it gets more complicated if we want to go to the moon or Mars, because we have to build some of those things to hold pressure and to hold things that we just don't have, that we get on Earth for free. So part of this is it's going to take many, many companies and many, many thousands, tens of thousands of people to come together to make all of this happen. And that's one of the reasons I'm so excited to work in human spaceflight, because in human spaceflight, I get to work in large teams with different scientists, with different engineers, medical doctors, and that's something that's really exciting for me. So sometimes when you think of a scientist, maybe you think of someone working in a lab all night, all weekend by themselves, and that could be farther from the truth. We work very collaboratively. So if you enjoy sports or you enjoy team or group projects, that is something that you get to do if you grow up and you work in STEM. And so I just want to show you this again. This is just an image that NASA has to kind of inspire people. These things might look a little bit different, but let's talk about you. Let's talk about what's going to happen, because we're going to go back to the moon sooner than probably maybe when you're working in your 20s or 30s. So what are we leading or building up for you? Well, this is a picture that we took from Mars Curiosity rover of Earth. Can you see Earth, that tiny little dot? It's very, very far away. So not just distance-wise, but communication-wise, and also in order to kind of rescue people, and just psychologically, you know, we're used to seeing Earth all the time. The International Space Station, the astronauts look out the cupola window and they get to see Earth, and that's our home, you know, that whole planet is our home. So to be really far away and to see it as a tiny little, almost looks like a star instead of a planet, right, in the sky, that can be kind of unnerving. And so we want to make sure when we go, we're ready, that we have everything we need. We've tested it out as much as possible. So that's what I want you guys to think about. That's what I want you guys to get so excited about, is this next step of Mars, but also we're going to do the moon to get you ready for when you're older, so we can share that data and that engineering that we've discovered. All right, so back to kind of what I do. What does this mean for EVAs on Mars, for spacewalks on Mars? I'm going to show you a video here of some of the challenges of what it's going to take in order to complete that trip. All right, you can't see, can you see it now? I go full screen?
Yeah, it's loading up now.
One of the challenges that we face on our mission to Mars is how our brain will adapt to the changes in gravity.
It could take up to 6 months to get there, but here's the problem.
The more time you spend in space, the longer it takes your brain to readapt to gravity.
So what does that mean? Landing on Mars after being weightless for 6 months, you have trouble walking straight.
Your vision is affected.
Poor eye-hand coordination.
Motion sickness, dizziness, vomiting.
Some people don't even want to move.
Landing is one of the most critical aspects of the journey.
So how will this impact our trip to Mars? First of all, landing on Mars will require good eye-hand coordination and perception.
So, say you have a safe touchdown.
But there's an emergency situation and you have to exit the vehicle.
If you can't function, it could be a pretty dangerous situation.
This is just one of the human challenges we'll face on a mission to Mars.
We don't have all the answers yet, but we do have the key.
The International Space Station.
Every day aboard, we're learning more and more about how our bodies adapt to weightless environments and gravitational transitions.
We're going to Mars.
It won't be easy, but because of the research that we're doing today on the ground and aboard the International Space Station, we'll be ready.
All right, so you can see that it's going to take a lot of challenges in order to make that long trip just to get to Mars. And that they're just discussing the landing piece of it, once you land after being in space for 6 months. And what does that mean in order to respond? And then there's living on Mars, and then of course there's coming back.
By far, the most common question we get asked as astronauts is, how do you go to the bathroom in space? So let's take a peek at the process.
Sorry.
That's okay. YouTube's sneaky and always loves to get another video going in afterwards.
All right, let me try this again. Here we go. All right, back? Okay. So for the challenges of going to Mars. So those are the physiological aspects. And why is that important to a spacesuit? Well, that's important because the spacesuit is our space vehicle for one person. It's a very personalized space vehicle, and it is demanding to do spacewalks. And if something were to go wrong and we had to go do a spacewalk, we want to make sure that we're okay, not just to land the vehicle, but also to do the spacewalks. And there's challenges ahead in what we're working toward to get us to the moon, but again, for you. So if you remember any pictures from Apollo, we had these kind of big, bulky spacesuits and people bunny hopped around. And I'm going to show you a video of that in a second. And then if you've seen The Martian with that video, the spacesuits are very sleek and narrow, and it was really easy for him to walk around in. And that's the future. That's still kind of sci-fi for us right now, but that is the direction we want to move. We want to get to a spacesuit that seems more like kind of thicker clothes than necessarily a huge, big, bulky spacesuit. We want to make sure we can attach tools, we can attach climbing gear, and that, you know, it doesn't seem quite as arduous to go out and do a spacewalk. So we need new spacesuits, and that's something that is near and dear to my heart, and working on that. I'm going to show you really quick a funny video about what happens when you have a spacesuit that's a little bit more challenging to move in. But you'll also get to see what 1/6 gravity looks like, which is on the moon. And I'll come back and we'll talk a little bit about what is the gravity on Mars at the end when we do the Q&A, and what do you think that means in terms of what it would be like in relation to the video you're going to show here. So let's watch this one. And I'm going to actually jump around a little bit on this one.
I was strolling on the moon one day in a merry month of December.
So can you see how they're kind of hopping around?
When much to my surprise,
I'm going to jump over a little bit. See? It's kind of bunny hopping. That suit is hundreds of pounds heavy. It's a very, very heavy suit. So on Earth, we actually use a weight lift system to compensate for the weight if an astronaut needs to get in it for any kind of testing. But on the moon, they can just bounce around like bunnies because of that 1/6. However, they fell over a lot. And part of that was their lower torso assembly and the way things were designed in their suit. They weren't able to necessarily walk like we did on Earth. So in terms of that, and I'm going to make sure I pause this so we don't get another video this time. There's a lot more we need to do. Now, we think we've figured out the walking thing. We have a lot of experience both on shuttle and the space station and on Earth. And so we're excited that we should be able to go back to the moon and actually walk around. You'll still be able to jump, which is really exciting, but we will be able to walk more, and we should be able to kneel down and get up much easier. They won't have to do the bouncing to get up that you see. However, to go to Mars, that's 1/3 gravity, so you're going to have kind of an in-between problem. And you'll have an atmosphere, but you'll still have the dust that you have, similar but different dust that you have on the moon. And so we have to make sure we clean the spacesuits, we keep the humans inside the spacesuits, not exposed necessarily to all those outside elements of the dust. So there's a lot of challenges that will be different on Mars that necessarily won't be the same on the moon. Yeah. Okay. But let me share a little bit about me. So, you know, how did I get here? How did I get this really cool job? What was I doing before? So this is a picture of me in grade school. My family, we lived in Chicago at the time, and then we moved to Florida. And part of what we loved to do was sailing. So I would go sailing with my parents, and that was my first exposure to exploration and safety and working on a team, because of course my family was a team. And all of those things that it takes to kind of do things that are really exciting and really adventurous, but also you have to be safe in those environments to make sure that everybody is safe coming out of that adventure and doesn't get hurt. But for me, when I was a little girl, I was really inspired by energy. I loved math. I loved time. My father would talk about explorers using the stars to navigate on boats when they weren't really sure. We didn't have GPS technology that we do today that's, you know, we can access for everybody's phone. So it was a very different time before all this technology that we had. And I just was totally in love with this concept. And so when I grew up, I wanted to study and work as a physicist. And so I did. I grew up, I took classes, AP classes in high school. And then I went to college and I majored and I got multiple degrees in physics. And from there, that's what allowed me in my 20s to work at NASA Johnson Space Flight Center in Houston, Texas. And I was an astronaut trainer for spacewalks. So this was back during the shuttle days when the space shuttle was still flying. And I worked Space Shuttle and International Space Station, EVAs, with different space shuttle crews. So it was things like helping them get in the suits, helping them turn the suits on and make sure all the checks were good before they would depress and go outside, and then bringing them back in. And then I would go into mission control, which is what you see up here, and I would support them and look at their suit data and their some of their other data that we have to take into account to make sure that they were good and safe on a spacewalk. So that was just exciting. It was a dream come true for me to be able to do that. School was a lot of work. It was hard, but to me, it was totally worth it. And it's very exciting. So, but a little bit between there too, there was other elements of my life besides just academics that came into play. So I had mentioned about being on a team as a scientist, working with engineers. Not only what was I on a team with my family, but I also ran cross country and I did other sports like soccer. And the cross country I ran in high school allowed me to get a scholarship to go to college in to help pay for college. And so I also had good grades, but there was many pieces I had to put together to be able to pay my way through college. And that was exciting for me because, again, I got to strengthen those teamwork skills, but also help get the compensation to pay for tuition. And then, you know, I played the piano. I was really excited. And my grandmother paid for me to go to space camp when I was a little girl. So that was just exciting. And then you see me here doing different experiments. This one flew on the space shuttle. This is an experiment that we used when I was an undergrad to work on different high energy physics that we were doing. So that was prepping some of the samples for those experiments. So I tried a lot of different types of physics. I was able to, by being on research teams, actually work toward the research that I really love, even as an undergrad, and then of course into graduate school. So it's never too early to be part of those teams. It's never too early to explore what you think you might like. So my advice is try lots of different things. It's okay if you try a sport and you don't like it. It's okay if you try a hobby. This is the time to try things. This is the time to see what really excites you. And you want to practice at those things and you want to get as good as possible. But you don't want to ignore your schoolwork, your family, or your friends. Those are your foundation. And when things are hard, or you have a challenge in one of these other areas, especially your family and friends are going to be your core to you. So always remember that and make time for them. And I think a lot of us learned this in COVID. Maybe we got too close to all of our families and we need a little more space. But in general, right? That is your core and they're always going to be there for you. And so you want to make sure that you spend time with them, even while you're trying to get as good as possible on the things you like to do. And don't let anyone else tell you that something is not important or that you shouldn't have time for it. Anything you're interested in is important. It's going to come in all different ways throughout your life. And so make that time. And don't listen to other people when they tell you not to do something. And then what do I do as an adult now? Well, as a scientist, we get paid well. I have a house, I go on vacation, I have my car, but I also get to do some really fun stuff. So I'm a scuba diver. That was not something that I had to wait till college to save up enough money to do. So I did start diving in my 20s and I continue to dive today. And as Joe mentioned, one of the things I love to do is I go back to Florida where I spent a lot of my childhood and I actually help a nonprofit basically restore active coral out in the Florida Keys. So we're trying to repair some of the damage that was done out there and bring some of that life back to the ocean out there, which is exciting. And then I love flying seaplanes. Those are my favorite type of planes, but I'll fly any plane that somebody will let me and I can afford to. But those are my hobbies. So don't think that just because you didn't grow up to be a pilot, as a main career thing, you can't fly. Or, I think sometimes when we're younger, we think, well, I have to pick one thing or another. There's a lot of different things you can do as an adult. And really sky's the limit there. So, or the ocean. Okay. So as Joe mentioned, there's the Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory. I want to talk a little bit more about how important this is for the spacewalks. The Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory is a place where the astronauts are able to train and we can weigh them out either in totally neutral, which is microgravity, or we're starting to weigh them out in that 1/6 gravity for the moon. And this pool is one of the largest pools in the world. It was 20 feet dug into the ground and 20 feet out of the ground. So it's a 40-foot deep pool, and it holds all the habitable modules of the International Space Station. And for me, it was just amazing to combine my love of scuba diving with my career, which is not something I would ever thought I would have combined, but actually did help me get a job in the spacewalking training group. So again, those interests that you might have out there, just pursue them, because you never know how things are going to come together. And then eventually I was able to actually, as a trainer, practice doing a spacewalk so I could better understand how to train astronauts in the spacesuit. So this is me here. And it was just exciting. It was really amazing. It was very difficult, very physically and mentally challenging to do it, but was probably one of the top experiences in my entire life. So it was amazing to do. And we have these divers here that are safety divers for us. In case there's ever anything that happens in the suit, they'll pull us out of the water. But maybe that's, not your thing. You're like, I don't want to scuba dive. That's not really for me, but I'm really passionate about space exploration. Might want to work for SpaceX or Blue Origin, maybe not NASA, but I really love this area. Well, there are lots of different jobs that we need in human spaceflight and just space exploration in general, and here's just a couple that you might not think about. We have chefs that are preparing the food to make sure the food would be safe, especially by the time we get to Mars. We have video and art designers, reporters, doctors, pilots, engineers, scientists. Pretty much if you could think of a job, there's probably a match or someone that we've worked with for space exploration. So don't think necessarily that just because you're not going to do science or engineering, you can't interact with this world. This world is very open, and we need all types of people to make it successful. So let's spend a few more minutes kind of going back to EVA. This is one of the first missions I got to work in mission control. This is the Columbus module from the European Space Agency, and this is Rex Walheim, a good friend of mine, an astronaut, and he's doing a spacewalk on the outside of this module because we just attached it to the space station. You can see how beautiful the view is, but also how really vast space is and how challenging it can be to do this. So why would we do a spacewalk? I mean, it almost can seem scary. Well, it's really important because sometimes there's things that we can't do with robotics or with remote docking. So we do need humans to go out there, like connecting up power lines or kind of putting different bolts down to tighten things down. And so the spacewalks were what enabled us to actually finish the assembly of the International Space Station. And we anticipate there's going to be things like that for the Moon and Mars. In order to do the spacewalks, though, like I said, we have these suits, and they have multiple layers right now. This is the way we know best how to do it. To keep astronauts safe, we have to keep them safe from as much radiation as possible, from a micrometeor hit, from sharp edges or cuts that might cut their spacesuit. So that's why these suits look very bulky. But in reality, the spacesuit is actually pretty tight across your body inside. And so it's not uncommon after doing a really tough spacewalk, you might have a couple bumps and bruises when you come out of the spacesuit. And but again, it's worth the risk because it's one of the ways that we have to do certain tasks to be able to explore space. So what are we looking at now? What are we doing now to try to understand that physical demand that's going to be on the astronauts for the moon? Because we have to build a spacesuit that has enough consumables, meaning breathable oxygen, scrubbing of their CO2 that they breathe out, water or any kind of cooling system to make sure that they don't overheat or get too cold. And so all of these things we have to plan for in designing the next spacesuit. And so that comes into what we call consumables. So consumables relate to metabolic rates, and it has to do with the tasks you're doing. So if you're sitting in a chair, just kind of like at home, and you're not very active, you maybe don't get very hungry at the end of the day. But if you're out playing sports or, doing a whole bunch of different things, you probably get pretty hungry. So same thing, if the astronauts are out working, they're using this higher metabolic rate, and we need to make sure we can support them in that spacesuit. So this is a testing area we have. This is at night, because when we go back to the South Pole, it's going to be very dark for the astronauts. And so we're testing in the conditions that we think they would actually be working in as close as possible to Earth. And this is called the Rock Yard. And then the other thing we're doing is we've modified the way we train in the MBL. And you can see here the astronauts are now walking on the floor of the pool, which to me is very strange. Most of the time I was there, they were in microgravity kind of neutral buoyancy way outs. And now we've put this kind of replicate, dust and rocks and stuff so we can have them do activities on the base of the floor. And it's just so funny to me to see. But it's important that we use these testing facilities to prepare the suits in a way that they can support the astronauts safely when they go to the moon and eventually to Mars. So the astronauts do a lot to help us in that area. They actually exercise quite a bit, and they continue to exercise when they're on the International Space Station. It's something we're going to have to figure out how we do on the moon, but especially Mars, because in Mars, we're going to be in a much smaller environment for a longer period of time, and they still need to be physically active. So this is them running on a treadmill, and this bungee holds them down so that they actually have that resistance to run. And then they have kind of funny weight machines to make sure they can do squats and other weightlifting exercises. And this helps them with their muscles, but also their bone density. And then, of course, now we're growing food on the International Space Station, and the astronauts can get fresh food along with what we send them. So this especially is going to be very important for Mars because we're going to be so far away. We want to make sure that the human body gets the nutrition they need. Okay, so in closing, I wanted to leave you with a couple of messages, and then I'm excited to take some questions. So STEM is about understanding your fundamentals, absolutely. So you want a lot of interests, you want to be a good team member, but at the end of the day, you do need to get a solid degree. A solid degree does not necessarily mean going to, a big name university, but it does mean that you take the right coursework and your fundamentals when you go to get a job. And that's what's going to make you a good team member. And that's what's going to help you and us solve these really hard problems. So know your stuff. If you need to change because you figure out, oh, this is not really what I want to do, or that was interesting, but I think I want to do something different or grow, then that's fine. It's not all about one career in your entire life. As Joe mentioned, I've worked in human spaceflight, I've worked with the military and the Department of Defense, and I've worked in human healthcare. So you can do a lot of different things with that fundamental STEM degree. It will take work. Sometimes people ask me like, well, you probably got all straight A's and it was so easy for you. And that's absolutely not true. I had to work really hard at school. I did get good grades in high school, but then even in college, it just continued to get harder. And that's a good thing. You want things to get harder because that means you're getting closer to that edge of doing new and innovative things. Because people haven't figured it out yet. So it is going to take work, but it's absolutely worth it. And as you can see, I still do a lot of fun stuff. And it's going to take a lot of little choices. Every once in a while, you'll make a big choice, like where do I go to college? Or, which job do I want to take? But most of the time, it's all these little choices that you make that's what build your career and kind of build your adventures in life. And so the world may only see big ones. And unfortunately, as a society, sometimes that's what we do. We highlight everything down to a few seconds of a summary of someone. But in the reality of it, you made a lot of choices throughout your life to get there. And it's going to be a lot of struggles too. And so the world, again, only, especially on social media, shares those big successes. And it may seem sometimes like people are getting patents or Nobel Prizes or flying in space. And man, that's not happening. But reality is those people have been working most of the time, decades, to do those big accomplishments on multiple teams of people. So the world, it's easy to have these really short clips of, oh, this one's successful and this one's successful, but there was a lot of work involved for each person and each team behind that struggle. And the last thing I want to just leave you with is that there's a place for you. So if you haven't figured it out, it's okay. Take some time, have that adventure, explore different things, but we do need you and you're going to make a difference no matter what you choose to do. All right, so thank you so much for having me. I was just really excited to share my passion with you, and I look forward to your questions.
All right. Adele, thank you so much. I don't even know where to start. It's exciting times right now with, aiming to be back on the moon with Artemis in 2024, future missions to Mars. And you really got me thinking with those float plane pictures. How cool would it be to fly in somewhere, dive right off the float plane, and then take off after a dive? That would be pretty darn cool to get into some cool, remote, inaccessible area.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, let's take a moment now. I pulled together a little Kahoot quiz while you were presenting. So I've got a few questions ready for the classrooms. So let me share my screen here and bring it up. Let me pop the Kahoot up first. So if you head to kahoot.it, it'll ask you for a pin, and lucky for you, I'm going to pop that pin up on the screen shortly. So let me share my screen and let's get this Kahoot quiz going. Entire screen will work for this. All right, there we go. Our pin for today is 941-3568. So I'll give a few moments and see if we have some players come in and join us from YouTube or from our live classrooms. So 941-3568. And then we'll get started after we see, looks like our grade 6 class in London just joined us. I see them there. Looks like we've got some students coming in to join us. Now remember, the key with the Kahoot is to get the right answer, and to get the right answer quickly. You have 20 seconds. The quicker you get that right answer in, the more points you're going to get. However, the catch is if that answer is wrong and it's really fast, well, you get nothing. So let's see how we do here. I'll give another couple more seconds. Looks like Mr. Gomes' class just jumped in with us. All right. Well, let's get it rolling. Remember, you've got 20 seconds on the clock. Here we go. All right. Our first question for those who are paying attention. What is the new mission to the moon called? Was it Cassini, Artemis, Insight, or Dawn? So we've talked about that a couple times. There was a really cool graphic at the beginning that Adele shared with us as well. All right, most went with Artemis. Good work. Let's take a quick look at our leaderboard. Gabby Verbeelen holding down that leaderboard. Oh, but it's tight. It's a two-way tie, so Gabby must have been slightly faster. Here we go. Question 2, about how long would it take to get to Mars? This was in that little video clip, the first one that we saw. 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, or a year? What did that person estimate? What was their estimation? All right, good work. Most went with 6 months. Does the leaderboard shift? It a little bit, but Gabby's still holding down top spot. Question 3, what is the gravity on Mars? So how does it compare to us? Was it a third of Earth? Was it a sixth of, where's Urch? I think I better be a little more careful with the typing there. Was it a half of Earth, or was it the same? All right, fooled a few, but most went with 1/3. And we had a shift. Mateo's holding down the leaderboard now. Next question, 2 more to go. What was Adele's first exposure to exploration? Was it scuba diving, hiking, cave exploration, or sailing? All right, most went with sailing. We saw those cool pictures in the presentation, and wrap it up with a fun, easy question here. Ooh, Gabby's taking the lead back. This should be a fun, easy one. The Neutral Buoyancy Lab is a giant pool for swimming laps, training astronauts, indoor fishing, or doing cannonballs. Adele, maybe you can confirm. Have you ever done a cannonball in the Neutral Buoyancy Lab?
No, but they did have a tour one time, and one of the tour people ran and jumped in the pool, and now they don't allow tours on the perimeter of the pool anymore.
Oh, man, I could totally see that. Wow. All right, most went with training astronauts. Let's check out how the leaderboard has shaken out. 3rd place, Eliana. Mateo in 2nd. Or so, yeah. And Gabby holding down that 1st spot. All right. Awesome, everyone. Thanks for playing a little Kahoot action with us. Let me stop that screen share and let's do a little Q&A action. All right. So joining us today, we've got classrooms via YouTube. If you have a question, please pop it into the live chat for us. But I'll start off as well, shouting out to our grade 6 class joining us in London, Ontario. They're in the call, but their microphone isn't connected, so they're going to type us a couple questions via that live chat. Let's grab, make sure I have the right page here. We're going to head to Texas and Austin, I believe. Austin, Texas, with some 5th graders. Let's bring them in and let's grab a question or two. Hey, Austin, how are we doing?
Good.
Hi.
Alors, vas-y, pose ta question.
In spaces, is there air conditioning?
There is a type of air conditioning. We have a fan that blows and circulates the air around, and it keeps their air temperature good. And then they also have a cooling garment that makes sure that their body temperature is good by running water in tubes along their body. So good question.
All right, let's bring you guys back in. You have another one you want to get in before we go to a YouTube question?
Yes. Would Miss Adeline, would you go to space if you had the chance to?
Would you go to space if you had the chance to?
Possibly.
Possibly. I would go. I'm an explorer, so I would go.
All right, I can answer that easily. No question, 100%. If the opportunity came, I would go. I would lean towards the SpaceX way, where you get to do the multi-day, multi-orbit way. That would be my preference, but I wouldn't turn down a quick up and down trip either. All right, very cool. So Mr. Gomez's class is joining us, and they're on YouTube right now, and they're wondering, do you know how many astronauts are currently in space right now?
Ooh, that's a good quiz for me. I know there's at least 6, I think, possibly 7. I lose track now because we have so many different, SpaceX missions that are coming up and down. But I think we have at least 6, possibly more. So might have to write that as a follow up to Joe, and he can add it to the YouTube details.
Yeah, we'll have to take a look. That sounds about right. I think there's usually 6 rocking on the space station. But I know there was that kind of crazy mission recently where they sent 3 cosmonauts up. I know they're back now.
Yeah, they're back now. Added 3, yeah.
But they filmed the first movie in space, so that should be interesting to see how that turned out.
Yeah, I see one in the private chat. Have you ever tried astronaut food? What do you need to survive on Mars? Is Mars rocky? Mars is rocky. I have tried astronaut food, so I think one of my favorites. They have very good beef jerky and shrimp cocktail. That's actually quite tasty. But of course, they really love peanut M&Ms. That's a pretty common one as well. So they have a lot of good food, as well as very, very healthy and nutritious food. They even have scrambled eggs up there. So let's see. All
right. Yeah, that was a few questions from our grade 6s in London. Oh, that's interesting. Fireproof, is that an important feature that they try to work into the suits?
Absolutely. The suits are absolutely well, they're not fireproof, but they're fire resistant. So the material is just similar to what we do on Earth for people that work in kind of extreme high conditioned areas. So the materials are fire resistant. Yep.
All right. I'm going to bring our Austin crew back in. They've typed a few more questions, but it's always more fun just to ask them live. So let's bring them back in.
Alors, vas-y. Elena? Yeah, Elena is coming. Vas-y.
What is it like to swim in the giant pool?
So it's very cool. You do have to take a swim test. So before you're allowed to scuba dive, so I both scuba dive and I've been in a spacesuit in the pool. And before you're allowed to do that, you have to show you're physically fit. So you actually have to do a swim test. So the pool is actually quite warm. It's not as warm as your body temperature, but it is very, very warm. And that allows the divers to stay in the pool for multiple hours at a time. So when I would go diving, I would stay, I think it's between 2.5 and 3 hours. I would be down on 2 tanks, helping with the training and the observations of the training for the astronauts. So we are down for quite a long time, which means that you want the pool to be pretty warm. Let's see. I think you guys said, is each astronaut have their own suit? So it's a little good question generically. So for SpaceX, the ascent and entry spacesuits, which are not spacewalk compatible, you can't go out and do a spacewalk, but they will help them survive if there's a pressure issue in the vehicle. My understanding is that SpaceX's suits are sewn to each astronaut, to each NASA astronaut or any of the astronauts that they have that fly. But our spacesuit that I showed you, the white spacesuit for the International Space Station, is not. Those are actually sized with piece parts, and we build up a suit so that astronauts can actually wear a suit that fits them, but actually is kind of all different pieces that we use on orbit. And that helps us basically size to many, many astronauts. But we'll see what happens for the moon and Mars. That's an interesting question that we're actually discussing right now and how that's going to work.
All right. I think I see a little line up there. So let's get a couple more questions in.
Are you ever like really nervous while you look at the spacesuits or work on them? Like anxious?
So that's a good question. So there are times where we're training for the astronauts to go in a vacuum chamber, which means they get in a spacesuit and they go down to vacuum on Earth. So it's a smaller contained chamber as part of their training. And those suits that they wear are very expensive. And I remember one time they handed me over a helmet to give to the crew member, and they were like, "This is really expensive. Do not drop this." So the traditional training hardware is expensive, but not as expensive as the stuff that flies in space or the stuff that we use in the vacuum chambers. So yes, in that case, I'm very careful. The other answer to that is when I'm on console and I was working the data that I showed you, we're very vigilant to watch that data the entire time. And it's not just one person looking at that data. There's multiple people, multiple support rooms. But yes, we are very, very vigilant to make sure those astronauts stay as safe as possible.
All right, here's someone else.
How long will it take to build a society on the moon or Mars?
I don't know that. I hope as soon as possible. I don't know how long it's going to take. We'll see.
Yeah, I don't think we're close yet, but if Artemis is able to happen in 2024, I think they'll have kind of a little space station, right, where astronauts can kind of
talking about Gateway.
Yeah, Gateway. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so that's kind of cool. Let's grab one more here.
Last one.
How often do you get to swim in the large pool?
So I don't swim in the pool anymore. You have divers that dive in the pool every day. So the pool is running with astronauts at usually 4 days out of the week, if not 5 days out of the week. So they have astronauts in there every day that they're training different astronauts for missions. So it's very active. We have multiple scuba divers, a large scuba diving team that does that. But my job right now is to get us ready for the moon. So I don't go in the pool right now as part of my current job, but I did love when I got to do that.
All right, and I think I see one more person in line there. So squeeze one more in.
What is the temperature in space?
That's a good question. The temperature in space actually varies and fluctuates depending on if you're in the direction of the sun, or if you're in the shade, if you don't have the sun. So when we're talking about going back to the south pole of the moon, it's going to be really cold compared to, say, Apollo 11 when they first landed in the sun areas. And for the space station, it gets even more complicated because as the space station is orbiting and the astronauts are outside, they actually go through what we call day and night passes. So the temperature swings from several hundred degrees hot to very, very cold. And their spacesuit has to respond back to that. Which is why it's really an amazing engineering design that they're able to do that.
All right. Well, one more question, Adele, and I'm surprised this one didn't come up, but I guess it kind of did when that extra little video part played about going to the bathroom in space. So I imagine that's a really important component to design in a spacesuit because you're going to be outside for long periods of time. So is that a key engineering component that's being thought about right now as well?
It is, and because we're looking to try to do slightly longer and more stressful, higher metabolic rates for the moon and Mars, we're actually looking at the design of what we use now for the space station and discussing whether how much that needs to change. But for right now, the astronauts wear a diaper. So they wear an adult diaper. That is the safest and best way for them to protect against that while they're in the spacesuit. And that's only if they have to go. So, kind of like you, if you're out playing or whatever, it depends on how you feel. So they wear a diaper just in case. But for, the space station, we have a bathroom. For the moon, we'll have a bathroom. And of course, for Mars, we'll have a bathroom. So.
All right. Well, it doesn't seem to matter whether it's space or an ocean rower. It's always something that students are curious about in different exploration situations. How do you take care of those basic needs? Well, I want to start off with a shout out to those who joined us on YouTube, as well as our camera classrooms. Thanks for joining us today, and thank you for sending in some great questions and playing along in our Kahoot. And Adele, it's always a pleasure to have you joining us. It's exciting, the different projects you're working on, from the moon to Mars. And as a diver myself, I love the work that you do helping to restore coral reefs, because there's nothing better than jumping in the water and seeing it nice and full of life. So thank you so much for joining us and inspiring our students today, Adele.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We're going to sign off for today.